Hey guys, Victoria here and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'll be sharing some of my strategies when it comes to answering exam questions. So obviously I'm not a professional in this subject, but there are some things that I've learned throughout the years and just some things which I always do during my exams. So I thought I would just make this video to share them with you guys. Number one is to skim through the entire question before you start answering, and this is especially true for structured questions. I like to skim through just the entire question, like instead of doing the little branches first. I read the whole question first, and reading the whole question is important because many questions lead you through a problem, like maybe the answer in A must be used to get a certain answer in B, and maybe from the next branch in the question you will get an idea of what the examiner is expecting from you, like there are clues there, so make sure that you get all those clues by skimming through the question first. I know that when you get the exam paper, it's very tempting to start answering straight away, but skimming through takes like a minute, but it helps so much in the long run, so make sure that you try to do that whenever possible. Number two is to start answering the question and just skip the questions that you don't know. This also translates as answer the easy questions first, and there are two reasons for this. Number one, as you can answer the easy questions, you feel more confident, like you're very confident in the knowledge that you have because you can answer certain questions. So after that, even when you come across a more difficult question, you're still fine with it. You won't panic because you know that there are some questions that you have already know the answer to for sure, so you have obtained some marks. So even if you don't get this question right, you will still have a certain amount of marks in your hand, so it boosts your confidence. The second reason is when you start answering the easy questions first, it is likely that these easy questions will take up less of your time. So from the beginning itself, you are already ahead of the schedule. So when you come across a more difficult question, you are free to spend more time on it without worrying about the time constraint. So definitely always try to answer the easy questions first. And also don't get stuck on a certain question. Like I know sometimes we get writer's block, but there is no time for writer's block in the exam because the time is very limited. So whenever you do a certain question and you know the answer to it, but you're having a hard time recalling it, then don't like force your brain. Just skip that question, go to the next one. Just circle the question that you're not sure you have fully answered yet. Circle it to mark it so that you remember to come back to it later. The third step is just to remember to come back to the questions that you have marked, the ones that you don't know, after you complete the entire paper. Like I do this all the time. Sometimes when I open the MS paper, because I know that for MS there is a very limited amount of time. For paper 1 it's 1 hour plus or whatever, there's very limited amount of time, and I'm always afraid that I cannot finish the paper in time. So sometimes when I open up my MS paper and I see the first question and I don't know how to answer that, I start to panic. But then I skip that question and I move on to the next one, and if I still don't know the next question, I skip that one. When I finally come across something easy, I do it, and then I finish the entire paper before coming back to the questions that I skipped. And I'm always very surprised to know that the questions are actually very simple and I can actually answer them. But because that time I was under like a certain amount of stress, because I didn't want to spend too much time on this question, so which is why that I couldn't answer it. But once I have completed the rest of the paper, meaning that I know I have a certain amount of marks in my hands and I'm not too stressed anymore, I can actually then answer the questions which I have skipped before. This is the same for all the other subjects as well. Sometimes the more you force your brain to recall something, the less it will work. So instead of like forcing your brain, just move on to the next question, and when you're done you can come back to it. Number 4 is to never leave a question blank. Like maybe you know for sure that you don't know the correct answer, but you can just write down something related to that particular subtopic or a formula which you think can be applied to that. Just write down something and maybe you can obtain 1 or 2 marks rather than getting 0, and marks won't be penalized for wrong answers anyway, so I suggest that you never leave a question blank. Number 5 is to always give extra answers. For example, if the question asks for ciri-ciri Mesopotamia and bracket it's 2 marks, then but you remember 3 ciri, so you can write down 3. This is especially true for biology and moral essays. Moral essays especially, because when I write essays for Pendidikan Moral, let's say the essay is like 10 marks, I will give up to 15 points, because as long as your points don't oppose each other, marks will not be penalized for giving extra points. So why not like give extra points in case some of your nilai is wrong or huraian is wrong. True for biology essays as well. Give whatever you remember, just write it down, because marks will not be penalized. The examiner will have to read through your entire answer script and pick out the answers that are right and award marks for it. So take note of the marks that are awarded for each question and give at least 1 or 2 extra answers. If you have more time, then you can put in more answers. Number 6 is to read all the questions very carefully and try not to miss out on any questions. This is especially true for structured questions, because some questions like to camouflage themselves. And when you get the paper back, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you get the paper back, you realize that, oh my god, there was a question there. And the worst thing is when you actually know the answer to that question, but you just didn't see that question, so because of that you lose 1 mark. So always remember to read the question paper from the top to the bottom and flip to the last page of the paper. For the accounts SPM paper for 2016, I heard my friends say that there was a question on the last page of the exam paper. It was a 10-mark question, and many of them actually missed that question because they thought that the second last page was the end of the question, but the truth is the last page there was another question. And like, imagine if this happens to you during SPM. So make sure that you really read through the entire question paper and do not miss out on any question. You should also read the essay questions properly. This is true for biology, chemistry, English, BM. When you have to choose essays, read each word of the question properly before you choose to answer that question. And once you have decided that you want to answer that question, read that question again twice, just to make sure that you really know the scope of the topic. Because if you write an essay that is out of the topic, then no matter how good your essay is, you'll probably be awarded like 3 marks. So to avoid that, make sure that you read every single word in the question carefully. Number 7 is time management. It goes without saying that time management is very, very important when it comes to answering exam questions. Make sure that you know the time that is allocated for each paper and then specifically each section. So roughly you should allocate the time for yourself depending on your speed, and once you reach that time, even if you didn't finish that section yet, you should move on to the next one. This is especially true for essays, like for BM essay bahagian A and bahagian B. If you reach a certain time for bahagian A already, you should move on to bahagian B because it like has more marks. It's 100 marks as compared to the one which is 30 marks. So depending on the amount of marks, you should spend your time accordingly. Try to get your exam paper done quickly without rushing it, because when you rush, you will make careless mistakes. So do not rush, but also try to finish it as quickly as possible. You can increase your speed by doing a lot of practice, because once you're familiar with the format of the exam and everything, you should be able to finish your exam questions fast. And also, if you have revised sufficiently for that exam, then the knowledge is all there. You don't need to like use so much effort to recall it. Then that's also another way to increase your speed when doing exam questions. Step 8 is to recheck your exam paper. I think this is the most important step of all. Whenever I sit for an exam, I always make sure that I have the time to go through the entire exam paper again. For essays, you have to make sure that you have enough time to read the entire essay that you have written again word by word, because you might have unknowingly made some grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes because you were kind of rushing when you're writing that essay. So make sure to read it again. And for structured questions, I like to recheck my answers as well. I will go and proofread and also add the information that I could recall, extra information that I could recall into the structured questions. So as I'm checking my answers, I'm actually proofreading for spelling mistakes and I am improving my answers as well. For multiple choice questions, always go and re-answer that question again, because usually for MCQ, you will be able to finish the paper in like 30 minutes time. So you have a lot of time to redo that question maybe once or twice to make sure that you didn't make any silly mistakes. And also a very important thing to make sure is that the answer you have circled on the exam paper matches on the one you shade in your OMR, because the only thing you're handing in is your OMR, and the worst mistake you could make is if your answer doesn't tally with the one you shade at your OMR and you actually got the answer correct but you shaded it wrongly. This actually happened to me once in a maths exam in primary school, so since then I've always checked like once or twice to make sure that my answers always match with the ones in OMR. For paper 2 maths questions, always check your answers, because in maths it is so easy to make careless mistakes and it's so important to avoid that. So especially for maths, always recheck your answers, and you can check your answers the other way. Like for a certain question, maybe it requires addition, so when you got the answer you use addition, but then when you recheck the answer, make sure that you use the other way to check it. Maybe you use subtraction to check it and vice versa, because if you use addition again, if you use the same way as you did when you first did your answer, then it's likely that you will make the same mistake again even when you're checking the answer. So always use the alternate way. So that is the general concept. Like obviously for maths and additional mathematics in SPM, they won't ask you about addition and subtraction, but you know, just to give you a rough idea of the concept. Number 8 is do not discuss the answers when you have already handed in the exam question to your teacher. I know this one is hard because it's very tempting to discuss the answers with your friends and to get involved in that intense discussion once the exam is over, but try not to get involved in it, because once you find out that you lost marks for something, it will affect your mood and performance for the following exams. Once you have handed in your exam papers, the answers cannot be changed. So whether you're right or you're wrong, it cannot be changed anyway, so there's no point discussing it. Just try to focus on your next exam instead. So that's all the strategies I have for answering exam questions, and I hope that you found them helpful in some way. All the best for your exams, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!